Greg Cohen, I'm the president of Paya. We are a GTCR-backed company, so private equity-backed business. We just purchased about a year ago from what was formerly Sage Payment Solutions. Rebranded it as Paya, and we do a lot in the card-not-present space, specifically in business service segments. And interestingly, we're all talking about retail spend and what happens at the point of sale. And a lot of what I deal with is what happens at the point of invoice. And what we're starting to see, especially in some of our segments, even like healthcare, is amazing desire to speed up cash flow. And what's the fastest way to do that? If you think about where consumers are, like you and I, right? We're sitting on our phones. We've started implementing things like invoice and text to pay and other things off of that to drive mobile adoption. It's not necessarily that we're pushing mobile. We're following where the customer is. And when you think about your end user, merchant, or business that you're dealing with, I don't always think about retailers anymore. I think about healthcare. I think about manufacturers. I think about distributors. I think about how to speed up cash flow. And the way I think about business, it's no longer how does somebody accept payments, right? The real solve is how do I grow my business? And so when we start thinking about solves, it's not about payments. What's the frickin' problem, and how do we fix the problem? And so with that, let me invite my three panelists up here to talk a little bit about themselves and a little bit about their thoughts on mobile payments and where it's going. So John, Michelle, and Tim, can you join me up here, and we'll do a little kind of Q&A and give them a little bit of overview. The other thing I want to think about when I think about mobile is, it's interesting because we all sit here and we're saying, nobody's doing this stuff at the point of sale yet. I mean, you would ask me in 2010 how many of my transactions were going to be on my phone. I remember sitting at ETA conferences and we'd be having these polls up and everybody, 80% by 2015. And I would all be there. And I'm sitting here in 2018. Who thinks it's going to be 80% by 2020, right? I mean, but when you start to think about mobile, I actually kind of break it into three categories, right? You've got mobile payments at the point of sale, but you also have mobile shopping, right? And so what's happening there? If you think about the $5 trillion of retail payments that are going to happen by 2020, 15% of that's going to be a card-not-present world, and 50% of that is going to be done on a mobile device. It's not necessarily going to be a tap, but think about the experience when we all shop, when we sit around and I'm waiting for my girlfriend. She's sitting in Louis Vuitton looking at whatever the newest whatever is, and I'm sitting outside in the mall on a chair because I'm totally bored with what she's looking at. And I'm sitting on my phone looking at something to buy. And all of that happens all day long in your life, wherever you are, whether you're on the couch, whether you're in the car, whether you're waiting to pick up the kids. And so that type of transaction is going to be 50% of your e-commerce spend here in the next few years. And then the other piece that continues to grow is actually mobile point of sale. Think about the experience when you have into retailers now, and it's not just the Apple store anymore where you walk in and someone's coming up to you to a device. Came here last night, way too late, in the taxi cab, and instead of swiping through the machine in the back, the guy hands me his phone and he does a Square transaction. That's mobile payments. So if I break it into those three different categories, it's just an interesting way to think about mobile payments, because if you look at our title here, right, it's why 2019 is the year mobile payments will go mainstream. Well, depending how you define it, it may actually already be mainstream. I think it's depending how you define what mainstream is. But I will throw it out to these guys. Is 2019 actually the year it goes mainstream, or maybe not? So, with that, maybe I'll just kind of start here at the end, and Michelle, maybe a little bit overview of what you do and your thoughts on mobile.
Yeah, and I'll keep it really brief because I know we've got really great things to share with everybody. I basically had a journey of 25 and a half years at Intel. I always say I started right out of kindergarten. Otherwise, I'm getting really old. But most recently in January, I started my own consulting practice. I'm working with retailers, helping them deploy technology, kind of get going. I act as a catalyst, driving kind of that actionable innovation with retailers.
Great, thank you. My name is John Sternal. I'm a partner in a marketing and PR firm called Merit Mile. We're located in Florida, and for 25 years I've been working directly with reporters and journalists on various types of stories for a lot of clients. Many of the last years I've been working closely with mobile companies and mobile development companies, so I've really gotten to know a lot of the issues that are being faced in this type of an industry, and happy to share some thoughts today.
Thanks. Good morning. My name's Tim Willey. I work for Wells Fargo Securities, which is the investment banking arm of Wells Fargo. I've covered fintech and payments for about 18 years as an equity analyst, so I've seen a lot evolve over that time with payments, and expect that the next 5 years will be mind-boggling compared to the last 18. So happy to be here and share some thoughts.
Okay, well, we'll start with you. We'll just hit that. Okay? Mobile payments 2019.
I do not see the point of sale and the Apple Pays and the Samsung Pays being mainstream for years. And I think we will be in what I call a appified or branded payments environment where consumers continue to gravitate to their favorite retailers or service providers who offer them some kind of app-based order, pay, invoice experience. That's what I think.
I think for a lot of years now, or at least the last couple of years, mobile payment, the reality of mobile payment has been certainly possible. I think a big question we have to be able to answer is, you take an experience like Amazon.com. When I and a lot of my colleagues go and make a purchase on Amazon, we don't know any other way but to make a payment through the phone. So what is it going to take that type of a mindset and transition it over to especially physical retail storefront? And a lot of it is certainly is experience. A lot of it certainly is getting the infrastructure up and running and connecting those two. So in fact, a lot of the conversation I had last night with some of you is there seems to be a continued frustration of being able to pull that all together, and perhaps the development community is a big piece of that puzzle.
And I think what I would add is retailers are under a lot of pressure, and I think they're finally starting to move and deploy new user experiences, things like buy online, pick up in store, buy online, return in store. And the first thing they're doing is they're not saying, let me get in line and try to integrate that new use case with the 15-year-old point of sale. They're instead saying, let me land it on a brand new mobile device, something quick and easy. There's lots of choices out there nowadays. So basically they're saying, let's start out and innovate and do it quickly on a mobile device for the worker. So what I've seen, at least in my practice, is a lot of these things starting to take off and becoming a pretty meaningful business.
Yeah, I think the problem with point of sale is it's not hard for people to pull a card out. And somebody said in a prior presentation, until you give me a reason to use Apple Pay, to have some kind of rewards program that's good for the App Store or iTunes, then why do I care? You know, because actually every time I try to use Apple Pay personally, I just tried it yesterday at Walgreens, I had to tap the phone 3 or 4 times before it finally worked, right? And I just don't think that consumers are that enamored with that experience, but Uber or ordering through Grubhub on the app or doing something that is cool, that's convenient, and until you make it just so easy, so much easier than pulling a card out of a wallet, I don't really see the handset being the payment method at the point of sale.
Yeah, and I've also heard and read a lot about security seems to be a little bit of an issue for consumers. There's a lot of polls out there that say people are wary of using mobile payments because of security. And I go back to my Amazon reference. I trust Amazon is going to be fine, and maybe I'm a little too trusting in that given the state of where we are today with information privacy. But I think that if you had a landscape set up where the consumer was motivated and they had the behavioral mindset to walk into a store and pay with their phone, I think they're ready to do it. I think they'd be excited to do it because they've embraced payment through phone, through other channels.
Why is Starbucks so successful with their, how does Starbucks differentiate from a mobile standpoint compared to all these other folks that have struggled?
So I think the beauty around what Starbucks is doing is they didn't start payment first. They started with let's create new user experiences. Let's create more around our loyalty program. Let's help you order online. I know for me, when it was my birthday, they said, you can get a free coffee, but you have to order it through the app online. So they're training people with little events like that to build loyalty. And then, oh yes, part of it is I'm also paying via my mobile device, but it wasn't just about the payment. And I think that's what they've really done right.
See, that is actually a big part of it. You've got to have the infrastructure work first and foremost, because if it doesn't work, people, when they try it, they're going to give up on it and they're going to go back to what they're always used to. But the fact that it's kind of new and cool and to Michelle's point, they do incentivize you to do it. That's a great recipe for success of why I think that it is successful for Starbucks.
I think it's also about frequency, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges at the point of sale and with any mobile right now, and if I think about consumer payment methods over the 18 years I followed the space and what drove real adoption, whether it was the debit card, which people like didn't really jump on right at the beginning, whether it was online bill payments, right? It becomes a little bit around the frequency and the ubiquity of the experience. And Starbucks was probably part of their success was not only a great experience, but the fact that people go to Starbucks every day, right? If they didn't go to Starbucks every day, if they went there once every 2 weeks, they might not care that much. So if you think about, retailers that have regular foot traffic, right? That type of experience makes a ton of sense because you throw loyalty, you throw specials, you throw receipts, et cetera on there. That's all really makes that experience better. I think for something like the phone at the actual tap and go point of sale to really take off is you actually have to show people it's everywhere, right? And so think about the debit card as an example or credit. When you first put those in the hands of consumers, there was a small amount of consumers that got them. There was a very small amount of retailers that accepted them, so nobody really cared. But then when debit hit the scene and every consumer had a debit card in their wallet because the banks and the networks pushed it out there, and then every retailer, large and small, said, well, we need to start accepting debit. That's when the aha moment happened. It was like, wow, like I can use this thing everywhere. I no longer need to bring my checkbook with me or have cash. If you think about the mom and pop environment right now, where is Apple Pay accepted, right? We're still going to Whole Foods. We're still going to Walgreens. We're still going to Best Buy. People don't expect to be able to use it everywhere, so it's not top of mind. And I don't know how that problem is solved, but I think that's one of the issues with the true point of sale tap and go versus a retailer specific brand where I'm there all the time and I know I can use this all the time and how it works.
I don't know that mom and pop is where this is going to take off. The irony here, of course, is if I were to go up to a food truck or even a flea market, I almost expect that those are the types of really small, ultra small types of merchants that would be doing Square, that I'd be making a mobile payment through. I think the mom and pops are not going to be the ones that help us take off. Starbucks is a great first step, but as we were talking last night, I think you need the Targets of the world, the Best Buys of the world, the large local grocery chains of the world to truly come out with these programs and not only incentivize people, but to make the awareness known so that when you walk into a store, you know that not only is this an option, but it's actually the preferred option. Whole Foods is kind of starting to do that. Now you've got to go and swipe your phone to become recognized as a Prime member to get the discounts, but they need to push it a little bit further so I can pay through my phone, not just be recognized through my phone.
Half the brands you just mentioned were part of MCX. So, go back a year or two, right?
God.
So, what got in their way other than a bunch of people trying to figure
Egos.
out how to compete and cooperate at the same
I think to
time?
the consumer, it didn't add any value. I mean, they would show that, yeah, you could pay at all these places, but again, I always think of my mom, who's 77, and does she really care about how she's paying? No. I'm the one that works in payments that thinks about it. So I think what I do is work with retailers to say, yes, you want to put it in your app and you want to have more and more features in your app, but the reality is in a perfect world, 80-90% of your customers may never have your app. Because the reality is, as a consumer, I'm not going to have 100 different retailer apps on my phone. So they need to design the experience to work both ways. And I do think banks could be an aggregation point. I'm personally a Bank of America customer. I would use a Bank of America wallet to mobily pay at all the retailers I'm not emotionally connected to, where I don't have their app. So I think they, as retailers, need to think about both the app experience and then the out-of-app, and making sure that they have mobile, implementations for both.
Yeah, I think digital wallet is key here. We're not just talking about payments. We used an example last night at dinner about Bed Bath & Beyond. We all get those 10% off coupons in the mail. That is a great incentive to get us to walk into the store. But think about how much money Bed Bath & Beyond would save if they transitioned a lot of that strategy into more of a perhaps even location-based, mobile-based incentive program for loyalty, where you're driving by the store, you get a notification, hey, don't forget to stop in. Here's your 10% off coupon. How many more people, every single one of us could get something from Bed Bath & Beyond every single day. So how many people would go in there and be reminded and be incentivized and go in there and actually use the darn thing?
So we've talked a lot about incentives, right? Are those the, I mean, why, so what's holding folks up to providing those incentives through mobile distribution to drive it? I mean, it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? We've talked about incentives, we've talked about the retail infrastructure. What's the holdup? What you know, does it start with use cases and then expand from there? What's the, you know, what's taking everybody to get off their duff?
I think some of it is, you know, one of the retailers I work very closely with would say, well, we're first incentivizing them to get our app and open our app. And I'm like, okay, but again, is that enough? And have they, you know, faced the hard reality of 80% of the consumers may never want or have their app? So what do they do beyond that? And then how do you incentivize those non-app users? You know, how do you reach out to them and continue to build up the brand loyalty? Maybe over time they do migrate and eventually download the app. If you're adding enough value, they'll go do that. So I think it's looking at a different way of transitioning from paid advertising into more digital media advertising, social media, and again, more this in-store experience, shifting the budget in those directions, which is always a challenge. I think a lot of this comes down to the people. It's change. They look at it and say, I've already got 5 projects on my plate. I don't have capacity for anything more till next year.
I think it's a little bit, you're just a very complex ecosystem of people that have their own roadmaps, right? I mean, you know, Apple wants to do something their way, Walmart wants to do it a different way, Visa and MasterCard have some say in how it goes around security and process, the merchant acquirer that sits there and has the terminals got to like be involved, and that's just a very kludgy way of, you know, sort of trying to build a system that everybody could use, right? So you just go back to building your own app and you put it in the App Store and try to incent people to use it. I mean, to me, all this could be solved, and solved is too simple of a word because I'm sure it requires a tremendous amount of work. But if you think about, people don't want to have 25 apps. I get that, right? Most Americans probably do 85% of their shopping in probably 6 or 7 places, right? Your Home Depot or your Lowe's, your Dunkin' or your Starbucks, you know, your Kohl's or your Penny's, you know, there's really, you don't need 25. Maybe you need 7, 8, 9. That doesn't take up a lot of space on the phone. And if people like Apple and Samsung just said, we're not here about promoting Apple Pay as much as we are just the environment of the handset, I could walk into Macy's with a Macy's app and Macy's points, and they know I'm there because of beacons or what have you, and iPhone's just willing to put that Macy's card right up on the lock screen for me, and a thumbprint touch makes the payment wherever I'm at on the floor, right? And then the phone actually became the point of sale payment device. Macy's had their experience. I get my miles or points or stars, whatever they are. But I think trying to bring everybody together to say that meets what we want to do, not everybody's there yet. But I mean, to me, that seems like that solves it. But I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of technology and bureaucracy behind that simple explanation.
Right, and to build out all of that technological infrastructure is just not something that I think the mom and pop level is going to be at the forefront of leadership here. I think it is going to take somebody like a Macy's or a few of these other large brands to really truly implement this infrastructure and then be able to market it and have the capital to be able to promote a program such as that. Once you have that up and running, I think you'll then have the development community that will see that and see opportunity and how they can branch that out into the mom and pop stores, and that's where I think it's really going to take off.
So the retail infrastructure creates the experience, then the pays just sit behind it. Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
I think they have to accept that. You know, I just really
Are they willing to, right? You see
Yeah.
Visa, Master, the major card brands are now kind of collaborating to create their own pay button to compete against the others. How does that play out? Are they okay sitting behind, you know, the brands of the retailers?
I mean, I think we're seeing more adoption. I think the 2 data points I heard this week were Samsung Pay now has 1.3 trillion transactions have occurred on their platform over the years. In addition, there was an announcement by Costco that they're now taking Apple Pay as well as Samsung Pay. So, you know, we'll continue to see these, what I call little, you know, grains of sand filling the well. You know, most of the research says once you get over 16%, you hit that tipping point where it now starts becoming mainstream. So, you know, when that will happen, whether it's 2019 or 2020, is not clear to me. What I do think, if I coach retailers, you do want to still have that brand control with your client. You don't want it to just be, say, an Apple Pay experience and they forget where they even bought stuff. So I think banks and retailers still want to have a living and breathing brand that stands for something with the consumer and don't kind of get bullied by the big tech guys, that they need to still have a seat at the
It's
table.
interesting, it's that battle, right? Whose consumer is it? Is it the bank's consumer, is it the merchant's consumer, or is it the technology
Yeah,
company's consumer?
because then the next thing will be the data. Who owns the data? And who retains control of that data? And again, a lot of the ones I've worked with are very concerned about the privacy and the security of that data. And they don't want to share it with third parties that then end up exposing it and causing a brand image for the retailer.
What are some of the best use cases right now, right? Obviously, we can't change the world all at once, because I would have been right in 2010 when I said 80% of the transactions. What are the best use cases right now where you're seeing fastest adoption?
Oh, I would think that the restaurant industry, the order ahead, the pay ahead, the Starbucks, the Grubhub, you know, it's clearly one that's just caught fire in the last couple of years. And again, I would say that's probably been an example of where the mom and pops realize they have to get in the game. Now, they didn't build their own app. They went to Grubhub and let Grubhub leverage it. But I mean, I think, you know, that one for sure, completely on fire.
Oh, since we got an analyst here, I have to ask you about the Level Up acquisition.
It's great. I mean, Level Up's a great company, and I think they deliver a tremendous amount of value to those mom and pops, which is why Grubhub saw value in buying that and upping the loyalty side of their game.
I would add to the restaurant one to say, pay at the table. I'm so tired of being 20th century in the way that America pays at the restaurant, where you walk away with my card and good luck, you know, and then you go to the rest of the world and you're paying at the table. So, you know, I know Americans like to think that we're the paragons of innovation, but the way we're dining is pretty 20th century. And again, you go pick your, whether it's, you know, Table Safe, Ziosk, what, you know, there's a gajillion devices out there. It's more the just get started and start doing it, because the restaurant will instantly see faster table turns, reduce labor costs, which are all pretty meaningful to the restaurant.
But are they really making the investment? I mean, I see it, I personally, I mean, I don't have data on it, but I personally see it in the QSR space. As you get into fine dining where you're talking about that, I just haven't seen the, at least domestic investment to do it. Obviously, people have legacy ERP, you know, POS systems and what have you, but, you know, and we're saying there's a problem, and they can turn tables fat, but are they actually doing it?
At least I saw at NRA kind of a shift in momentum this year, where I felt like we're starting to get there. So it was encouraging, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think an area, well, obviously transportation, right, Uber and Lyft, those are well documented. I think an area that will really start to pick up, I'd give it a couple of years just to be safe. But I think the grocery industry will be sort of appified, right? The Instacarts of the world. And, you know, look, Amazon buying Whole Foods definitely accelerated everything. But the convenience of, you know, I'll use my wife as an example. She seems to perpetually be sitting at the island in our kitchen on her iPad. I don't know what, but she's always looking at it. But what I realize is she's
Wait till the credit card bill comes in.
Right. But I mean, she's discovered Instacart, right? And that just saves, you know, a 15-minute drive and finding a parking space and walking all the way to the back of the grocery store to buy something that, you know, you need. And so I think like the grocery and the convenience store type stuff, the Drizzlies of the world that deliver alcohol in the Boston area, I think that's the next area that we'll really see big growth around mobile shopping.
But those use cases you mentioned, though, don't involve, you know, your phone. It's kind of a card on file transaction. You know, the consumer experience is mobile, but the transaction is not what you are, I think, about as at the point of sale.
As I said, I'm not very bullish on tapping my phone at the point of sale. I think it all becomes appified in mobile shopping.
That's what's a little baffling is, especially in the restaurant industry. I'll use another example is Moe's, the quick service. They've got a pretty decent loyalty program, and loyalty is a big part of usage here. On Tuesday, they'll send you a whatever % off text, and you go in, and why can't you just complete the transaction through your device? It's great that they use mobile as a way to get you in the store, but let us pay with our phones too.
There's a big card brand push that's going to be coming out, right, to move to contactless cards, right? So now I'm going to have cards that I can tap at the point of sale. And in many emerging markets, right, that came before the mobile payment piece. I think about my time up in Canada, and, you know, what percentage, you know, kind of came from that piece first. Does that help? Does that push us back because we start thinking about having to terminalize something differently in the market? How does?
I think it absolutely helps because it's very habit forming, and like Tim was saying earlier, you know, if you're a commuter and you're taking the metro 5 times a week, to and from, that's 10 taps right there of paying with your NFC contactless and or your phone. So I think we've seen in other countries, again, across Europe, where we're behind, where by lighting up that transit system first, it then drove a lot of adoption into the other retail points as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's you know, just going back to, I think that the contactless cards probably will start to form a habit with consumers of, okay, this is sort of also, I guess, how I could use my phone to make a payment. I tap a card, I tap a phone. I think that could push people, and I think that also would, again, going back to sort of just the ubiquity that, you know, if all retailers have to accept that, right, then the consumer just gets used to everywhere they tap, you know, and so whether it's a mom and pop pizza place picking up pizza, whether it's Best Buy, you know, now they just realize almost everywhere they're shopping, they tap. And I think that probably will help move it forward.
I think there's a fine line between creating a habit and creating an experience. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't, you know, roll over and grab my cards. I roll over and grab my phone. So I think people want to do everything in their life with their phones. I think they want their phones to control everything in their life. So the opportunity is there. We've just got to find a way to make it come to life.
We've talked a lot about a lot of stuff. I was going to throw it out to you all and kind of hit some questions from you.
This is a perfect time, because I know we have a short time, but I've yet to hear anyone, I've not participated in payment conferences since the 80s. Fed, Harvard, the city of Cumberland, right? So the biggest thing that I've yet to hear is disaster recovery, disaster contingencies, like in Hawaii, it's about what's happening in Puerto Rico, you're offline. There's no cash, and what are the contingencies? Because we need to make a statement, especially on the POS side, if there is any type of offline certainty or redundancy that will enable payment to continue on. And you have these websites across regulators, stakeholders across the industry, and everyone's trusted. So what happens? So I'm curious to get your guys' perspective.
It's a good question. There's no storing forward on a mobile transaction, right? So, you know.
I think a lot of this resides with the software on the point of sale. We've seen obviously a huge growth in cloud-based POS. I think a lot of the better providers actually do have kind of both an online, which is preferred mode, but then they do have the fallback for offline. Don't honestly think any of them are ready for a Puerto Rico type of situation for you maybe offline for a year. But I do think they feel like they could probably bring in, you know, mobile comms infrastructure. You know, there's been containerized comms networks that you could drop in locations, bring in battery-powered, generator-powered infrastructure so that, again, within a day or two, things could get up and running. I think, unfortunately, Puerto Rico is like the Six Sigma worst-case, you know, scenario.
Yeah, also, I think it's a very drastic example, extreme example. Just because we have, let's imagine a day that mobile payment infrastructure is widespread and everybody uses it. It still doesn't mean that cash is going away anytime soon, much the same way that once we finally do get electrification of vehicles up and running to be larger than 3% of the marketplace, gasoline-powered vehicles aren't going to go away either. So I think for a long, long time, there's at least going to be a nice balance.
Just hopefully the ATM machines work if there's no electricity. I mean, it would apply to MagStripe. It would apply, I mean, you know, I mean, that kind of dire situation, I think nothing, you know, works, right? Yeah. I mean, that's originally how the industry was built, right?
Take an imprint and then send over in the EU. I mean, just something of that level, right? Or, you know, for a few hours, it puts the market to its knees.
Hi, Dennis O'Neill, Capital Advisors. seems like this market is significantly fragmented. Everybody is trying to create their own mobile payment loyalty program. Don't you think at some point in time that all these apps and this technology will be leapfrogged by a digital currency that's accepted by everyone? And I guess the follow-up question to that is that why do you think, what happened in India and China where that we're getting mass adoption of digital payments opposed to the challenges that we're facing here?
Yeah, and I've been to China many, many times, and I think it's the beauty and the scary side of their country and the way it operates is it was government mandated. The government decided it was going to be QR code based because it was cheap and easy, and basically they rolled it out and they got 2 contenders, which is kind of their model. They'll enable 2. But they didn't need 20, they didn't need 100. The reality is, we have a very old, mature banking system in the United States with 6,000 banks. And so I don't think there's any way ever with any administration, the U.S. would come in and mandate one technology way of doing something and force the 6,000 banks to go do it. Jason would be up in arms. So it's not good. I mean, we believe in U.S. that competition is a good thing, and I also think we're not going to see just one model win out. I think there will be a camp of folks who are very much in the tech space and will love the Apple Pays and Samsung Pays. I think there will be another camp where people love the bank offered wallets. And then again, there will be the retail loyalists who love their retailer. And I think those 3 camps will kind of peacefully coexist and have different market shares over time, but I don't think one method's even going to win in the U.S.
I think there's a co-opetition is kind of the term that I've thrown out in the space where folks have tried to do it and go it alone. And I think about PayPal's first entrance in the time of the retail market and realize you can't go it alone in this ecosystem. It is way too fragmented.
I mean, if you look at, right, so it's a huge industry, payments. Everybody wants to be in it now. When I started covering the space 18 years ago, there were like 4 companies that were public. Nobody understood payments. In between 2000 and where we're at now, probably starting around 2012, the venture capital world went crazy, and people underestimated the entrenched, I don't want to say bureaucracy or protectionism of the incumbents, but they're very relevant players with lots of capital, lots of know-how. You have a lot of fiefdoms that need to be protected. And out of all of the money Silicon Valley poured into payments starting about 2012, only one company has really gotten out alive, and that's Square. You don't hear about probably the 2 to 3 dozen that died within years because they didn't have the right partners. They didn't understand the regulated nature of the business. They couldn't scale because they couldn't get merchants or consumers to accept the product, right? So that's the beauty of what we have now, but that's also the moat that limits, the government saying everything's got to change or some shiny object, saying we're going to disrupt the world. I mean, it's just a fact of life, and I think that's somewhat, why we haven't seen those massive changes also.
But my prediction is someday they will allow, say, Ant Financial to start taking U.S.-based credit cards. I think a lot of the work they're doing today in ecosystem development is kind of laying the groundwork for that. And then it'll be easy for them to flip a switch and now start being a real provider into consumer financial services in the U.S. for U.S. citizens.
Good.
Yes, Dave Jewell from Data Source. You're talking about mobile going mainstream in 2019. To me, it seems like it's more of a 2019, we finally understand what we're doing. Everybody kind of knows the technology, what's available, and what the challenges are, and what the good things have been, bad things. So we have a better understanding of it, but the technology keeps changing. Payments was the same for so long. The technology keeps changing. We've got to re-educate the consumer and the merchant. And that's what's going to happen now because it's like having a phone. Is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, that, to me, is the kind of thing that can slow things down, adoption-wise. You got to make a pivot sometime to get focused on adoption, but focus on technology to get people to use it. You've all alluded to that, but I'm just wondering if any of the panelists feel like advancing technology could actually be more harmful than it's good.
The question is, with all the technology changes on every piece of the ecosystem you have to hit, does that actually slow down the adoption or does it help speed it up?
What I've typically found is the holdback is not that the technology exists. There's lots of technology out there. It's more, again, around the business model changes and the fact that retailers have to change their workflow, change how a return is done, change how an order is taken, making sure that that order, if taken in a new way, still interfaces with, say, a kitchen management system so they make it correctly. So I do think it's one of those where it's the human practices around the technology that are usually the limiter. And I think when we look at this, is it more dangerous? I mean, I don't think so. I think technology in the long run can be managed. I think the good thing I'm seeing is a lot of these new companies are assuming security has to be built in. So they're considering that as part of the product design, and some of these new implementations are actually more secure. And we saw this with the wallets, where they're tokenizing from day one, instead of kind of doing things in the open.
I think that's why the development community plays a large role in this conversation, because there's even a lot of the vendors that are participating in this conference, everybody, the process of the infrastructure is so fragmented. Everybody has their own piece of all the different steps that come together to make it happen. But from what I hear, there's a lot of retailers and merchants out there that are frustrated because they don't know how to build it. They don't know how it all works. They don't know how it all comes together. I think that's the role that the development community has to step into and take more of a leadership role in saying, there's a lot of innovation out there, there's a lot of wonderful technology that's coming together, but in order to take it from concept to actual implementation, that's where we come in, and I'm still not seeing a lot of that activity.
I would, two thoughts. I think if you keep the technology out of the view of the consumer, right? So I would argue that technology has changed a ton in the last 10 years in a lot of areas of our life, and everybody seems to have adopted them pretty quickly as the technology and the experiences have gotten better for online shopping, and that's everything from the supply chain and the return policies and visualizing and being able to look at the shirt in 7 different colors by swiping the screen, right? All that has made online shopping easier and driven that adoption. So I think if you limit what the consumer actually has to do that's different with the next app rollout or the next handset rollout, then it doesn't get in the way. I think technology can actually enhance the willingness to adopt as a credibility factor, right? When Apple puts something on their phone, we all implicitly trust Apple. It got into the App Store. Apple blessed it, right? When we all do Uber or Starbucks for the first time, that's a halo kind of event. I used the Starbucks app. That was fabulous. Wow, that was really cool. I think I might download the Panera app because I eat lunch, not just get coffee, right? And so I think that actually, that kind of stuff, the implicit sort of approval of these big tech players actually gives the consumer more confidence in trying it as opposed to less. And I don't think consumers care about privacy as much as we think. And the networks have done a fabulous job of limiting the financial harm that consumers have had when they get hacked, right? I've never met anybody that had their life destroyed by the Target hack or the Heartland hack. Nobody lost their home or their job over that. The banks and the networks jumped in very quickly, made everybody whole, and they trust the system. Technology makes it work that way.
One more question.
John, you touched on this briefly with regard to consumer perspective. The key barrier over the years has always been security/privacy. And that always has been like number 1 or number 2 barrier. Where do you think the responsibility for dealing with that issue? Because from the sessions yesterday, from a technology standpoint, we clearly understand a mobile payment is more secure than other payments, but obviously that message hasn't been absorbed by many consumers. So where does that responsibility go?
I actually think that goes back to what Tim just mentioned in the technology implementation of it and the trusted brands, which again is why I think that it's your large grocers, your Targets, your Best Buys of the world are going to have to be the ones that truly roll this out, because people do trust those brands despite all the headlines that come out and all the data breach scenarios that happen. I think that banks also play a large role in this. People do trust their banks, and banks have actually been noticeably absent from large part of this conversation. We have been conditioned, not only conditioned, but incentivized to now do almost all of our banking over a mobile device. And why shouldn't a bank also play a larger role in helping to not only build out this infrastructure, but roll it out and promote it as well? I think trust and credibility are going to play large roles in the success of this type of technology.
But can I follow up? But how do you see a bank being able to do that, since, as you indicate, it's not a face-to-face meeting, it's all remote? You know, they're not there when the consumer is downloading the application.
Right.
How does that get communicated?
True, but again, going back to Tim's point, there was a point in time at which you tried mobile banking for the very first time, and you were willing to make that leap of faith and trust that it was going to work. It feels like it's going to be a lot of similarities in this case, where at some point you have to take that leap of faith and try it, which is why I think you're going to be more likely to try it with a Home Depot as opposed to Joe's ice cream shop down the street. Nothing against Joe, of course.
Okay. In the last minute before I get yanked off stage, okay, one sentence, mobile payments 2019.
Darden was breached. I think the news today was 500 million potentially, Darden, yeah, 500 million exposed possible credit cards. So I look at it and go, I can guarantee their board of directors is asking, what the heck are we doing? Not only does, recover from this, but why aren't we deploying more secure technologies? So again, maybe Darden would be accepting pay at the table on newer devices that are actually more secure.
I'll see you on the panel next year talking about the same thing.
That's a great answer. That's really the best answer. I would, it's still going to be Appified branded payments. That's probably not a full sentence. I'm not sure if there's a noun, a verb, and an adjective, but it's not going to be Apple Pay, Samsung Pay next year. It's still going to be retailer branded payments.
And I'd give you, this is an evolution, not a revolution, and it's just going to be back here next year. Thanks. Thanks, Lester.